What's an argument that you lost because the other person was too dumb to understand your logic? Guy once told me he was speeding on his motorcycle one night in the freezing cold and was almost caught by a police helicopter with an infrared camera. He said he ditched the copter by taking his coat off and cooling his body down to ambient temperature so the infrared camera couldn't see him. I ignored the fact that he'd be dead if his body temp dropped that much and simply asked why they couldn't pick up the heat from the engine. He said infrared cameras only pick up heat from organic sources. At this point I decided against even trying to argue against any of the ridiculous points he was trying to make and just ran right out of the conversation. You should always drive as fast as possible to get the best MPG. Driving twice as fast cuts your travel time in half and cuts your gas usage in half as well. My coworker thinks that police radar guns work by scanning cars to see how hot their engine is. Because the faster you go, the hotter it will be, right? I tried explaining how Doppler radar works, but she remains convinced that she's correct. Because, and I quote, my husband has one of those radar guns and uses it when he's cooking on the grill. Your husband has an infrared thermometer, you nut. Ask her how fast a steak travels when her husband grills one. Why it's not cheaper to buy a new $1,200 phone on a 24-month payment plan than to fix a phone that's paid off with a broken screen. $150. Guy said that I could touch a black hole because they only targeted stars and planets. I wanted to die. I was trying so hard not to laugh. I did not get credit in a game of Trivial Pursuit for my guess of King Tutankhamun. The correct answer was, yep, you guessed it, King Tut. I was like 13 and we had just done an Egypt study in school, so I was positive about being correct and pretty proud for knowing it. I once got the question which James Bond movie has an unhappy ending, so of course I answered on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which ends with his new wife being murdered just after their wedding. The answer on the card was none of them. I guess they really didn't like Diana Rigg. Was trying to ask my neighbors to shut their dogs up at night because we can't sleep, but my dogs never bark. There they are, barking in the background. Shook my head and walked away. I reject your reality, and substitute my own. In HS football, the night before a game, we would get together and set goals for the game. Defense set the goal of 200 total yards of offense allowed. I corrected the tour to make it less than 200 yards. They disagreed adamantly and kept the greater than. I was tutoring 4 of them in math at the time. They also hit their goal. More than 200 yards given up. A guy argued that a baby grand piano was for little children during their earliest piano lessons, saying that's why they're called baby grands. I explained that the term baby grand simply refers to the smallest size of a grand piano, about 4-5 long. He just insisted that baby grands were for little children, and that's why they're called baby grands. A guy the first knew in high school insisted Hawaii was in the Gulf of Mexico because that's what it showed on the map. He even opened our textbook to show and then looked at me like I was an idiot. I just told him to educate everyone he could then. A guy the first used to work with believed that germs were a myth. He thought bad air is what made you sick. We worked in a meat department. Luckily he would wash his hands and keep stuff clean, but his logic was dirty things make bad air. I tried so hard to convince him germs were real, to the point I would print off literature of various educational levels, from kindergarten to college level, and he believed it was all a hoax. It drove me up a wall. He also believed the moon landing was fake. We got in heated arguments over it, to the point my boss put a ban on discussing the moon at all. Now this is just a hunch, but your coworker may be a time-traveling gentleman from the Victorian era. I'm a bartender. When I put a drink up to be run to a table in the restaurant, the servers have to put a garnish on depending on the drink. I see new guy standing there staring at the lemons. Ask him what the deal is and he responds, these limes aren't ripe yet. Try to explain that's not how that works and guy tells me I don't have to be in a hole. Suffice to say we've lowered our standards for servers lately. I was trying to explain to my roommates that we can't leave our front door unlocked 24/7, especially when no one is in the apartment and when they're out and I'm sleeping, and that they should replace the keys they lost. Plus we're on a college campus where theft is pretty common and my room was broken into the previous year. We live on a college campus so we're safe. What good is a locked door going to do if someone comes in with a gun? If something happens that's just life. We went around in circles for 27 minutes. Worst argument ever. One of my college teachers gave us a test on computer hardware. One question was what is the most important part of any computer? It was multiple choice. CPU, memory, motherboard, PSU. I told him that the question made no sense. All of the parts are necessary. No one is most important. Without anyone, the computer would not work. He insisted that it was the CPU. Of course the question was flawed. The answer is obvious. The user. Ducks incoming chair. Whenever I use words my mother never heard of and tells me to correct myself, I now have to actually get Google definitions to show her I'm not speaking nonsense. Cause I used to always lose those because she's the mom and older. Therefore she knows more than me. Holy shit. I was in chemistry and we were gathered around a table and the teacher was asking about color of the samples and I said one looked amber. The whole class, teacher included, tried to tell me amber wasn't a color. I just had to let it go. I got into an argument with a guy who swore red cars were faster. His rationale was because Ferraris are always painted red, which is also not true. At first I thought he was just messing with me, but no, he really believed it and nothing I could say would change his mind. I finally gave up on arguing with stupid and told him how right he was. With this one, you could probably just say if red cars are faster, why aren't all cars in NASCAR painted red? I once was innocently commenting about something on the news about the Pope. The idiot guy the first was dating was like, I don't want to hear about those stupid Christians. You can't trust any of them. I'm like, name. You're Lutheran, aren't you? Him. Yeah, exactly. That's why I try to avoid Christians and their rants. 20-minute conversation as I tried to explain to him what a Christian was and that he was one. Didn't understand or believe. Turned into a breakup convo for realizing how dumb he was. My coworker believed in the we only use 10% of our brains myth. I tried everything but there was no getting through to him. I'm pretty sure he's only using 10% of his brain. I'll be finishing up my history degree in a few months. I really shouldn't be arguing my subject with people who've never had a reason to pick up a history book, but I was stuck with a buddy of mine for several hours a day for the better part of last year, and we got around to talking about pretty much everything. At one point, for one reason or another, we got to talking about the Comanche Indians. I mentioned a common misconception, and he countered with a stereotype that he learned in grade school. We went back and forth for a while, and I tried to reference books on the topic, but his response was always to restate the same stereotype and say I'm part Cherokee, so I know. Eventually, when he clearly had nothing left to say, he asked the most annoying question possible in that situation. Yeah, well, were you there? How do you even respond to that? I definitely wasn't there, but neither was anyone else alive today, and accepting that argument would pretty much void all study of history. I pretty much gave up. He's not a dumb guy, but history is clearly not his field, and there was no way anything was gonna come of the argument. I pointed out that his car mirrors were tinted blue. I just thought it was interesting. He got really offended, and when we actually looked at them to prove my point, he said one of the most baffling things I've ever heard. The mirrors aren't tinted. Reality is. Might be too late to the party, but I'll still share. I lost an argument with my sister over her new association with Amway. She brought in Nutri-something vitamin pills and claimed they were better than other brands. To prove this, she dropped her pill and another brand's pill into water. Because the Amway pill dissolved in water, it'll get dispersed through our body, and the other brands didn't dissolve, it'll go straight through your digestive system. When I brought up stomach acid, she doubled down on the fact that human bodies are 60% water. They kept insisting that they were entitled to their opinion over something that was a fact. For some reason, telling her that her opinion didn't sway the truth just made her double down. Situation. I mentioned that a certain YouTube personality was gay. I said it matter-of-factly, not to be mean. The guy has mentioned being gay on his channel several times. This girl got mad and girl kept denying he was into dudes. This was despite me pointing out that he openly identified as gay. She cited that it was her opinion to validate the dude's sexuality on what her stupid ass wants to believe. Whist getting a tour of our children's school garden. The teacher is rambling on about the different veggies and stuff they grow. We are walking by these giant sunflowers. Teacher: oh, these are sunflowers, for making popcorn. Me: you mean you add them to popcorn? Teacher: no. Sunflower seeds make popcorn. Me: I'm 100% sure corn kernels are used for making popcorn, hence the name popcorn. She sighed and moved on, continuing to think I'm a hulking 6-foot Neanderthal. Now we're at the herb section and she points at the thyme and rosemary. Teacher: this is thyme and rosemary. We use these to make chocolate. Me: what? You add those to chocolate? That has to give it a funky taste. I'm surprised the kids like it. Teacher: no, we don't add it to chocolate. Chocolate is made from them. I gave up questioning her at this point and finished the tour silently contemplating how this woman can zip up her pants in the morning, let alone get a degree and teaching certificate. When I was working waiting tables, they changed scheduling systems and the times printed were in military time. My shift said I started at 10:50, so that is when I show up. 10:50 a.m. At the end of my shift, my manager hands me a write-up to sign for being late. I refused because I was there at my scheduled time, 10:50 a.m. He then tried to tell me I was supposed to be in at 10:30. This is when I go and grab the paper schedule and point to where it says 10:50, clearly written. At this point I start to notice that all of the start times were either at the top of an hour, 1 o'clock, 1300, etc., or at the hour and 50. When making the schedule, he thought that 50 in military time was a half hour and would not listen to me when I explained as clearly as I could that it was the hours that changed, not the minutes. He still put that right up in my file. Stupid asshole. This was recent. Someone who doesn't run tried to tell me that running on a treadmill doesn't count because you can just lift up your legs and that the track does all the work. I tried to explain that while it isn't 100% the same as running outside, your body wants to stay relative to the moving tracks, so yes, you are propelling yourself forward. And many outside runners, myself included, run on treadmills at some point for training when the weather isn't cooperating. I'm pretty sure we would be able to tell if we weren't exerting any effort on the treadmill. He said that people who run on treadmills are lazy and we are all wasting our time pretending to work out. Okay buddy. Girl tried to convince me that she would lose her virginity if used tampons. I literally had to teach her the anatomy of the vagina, uterus, and she said that if you retract the poop while taking a shit, it's self-oral sex. I just wanted to kill myself after that. When my friend said that dinosaurs never existed and it was all a conspiracy perpetrated by natural history museums to deny God and make everyone atheists. X once argued with me that a vegetable is not a plant. Still a little mad about this one. I was in a marketing class and we had a big project to present why someone should or shouldn't go with a certain marketing strategy. We had Group A argue the for side and my group argue the against side. Well, Group A went first and they gave every detail of the entire argument, including all of the pros and the cons. They gave every detail, neither making it look good or bad because they gave both sides of the argument. So when we went up and presented only the negatives, we got criticized for looking like we didn't know the full picture. But the whole point was to argue why it wouldn't work. Flat earth, Newtonian relativity. When I was still in school, I'd work with my girlfriend's dad on some weekends for some extra money, and I'd normally be the only college-educated one in a field of grown blue-collar men. When one of them learned that I was a physics major, he was very eager to prove that my entire education was wrong. He tried to argue that the Earth doesn't rotate and therefore, still not sure how this even draws this conclusion, the Earth is flat. His argument was that the duration of a flight going the same distance from east to west should be different than a flight going from west to east because one way, you are flying with the rotation and one you are flying against it. I tried explaining relativity in the simplest terms possible. He understood throwing a ball when you're in a moving cart, train, walking in a moving plane, every possible example I could think of. I'd explain and he'd agree. When we got to a plane taking off being like the ball and the Earth rotating being the moving cart, train, I just completely lost him every time. He said it can't be the same and the liberals brainwashed me if I actually believe that. Someone was scared of getting a driver license because of the danger involved, so they were going to get a motorcycle license because it was a safer vehicle to operate. I tried telling them it was more dangerous, but they weren't having it. I'm in tech support. This is my entire job. Tangentially related, but in K-12 on a number of occasions I got into an argument with someone who would resort to talking at me in Spanish which I didn't speak and then end with a triumphant expression, believing they had just won the argument because I couldn't refute their points. My 10th grade chemistry teacher with my science fair project, I built an electric motor from scratch and tested the longevity of several different types of commutators. The teacher didn't understand it, so she gave me a D. I'm still upset about that well over 30 years later. How to use two and to properly. Played chess with a friend who did not the rules of chess. They believed pawns could kill an opponent by going forward, and that they could also move side to side as long as they are just going one space at a time. A really good buddy of mine is sorely convinced dinosaurs didn't exist. He's a smart dude too. Will not come to reason though. Last time I needed to call the support, I needed to verify myself. The quite unfriendly sounding lady told me to give her a PIN. I told her I never set up a PIN. Her answer basically was I shall tell her the PIN anyway. That went on around 5 times until I just hung up. Side note 1. You need to verify yourself before that step, which I did via temporary PIN in an SMS. Side note 2, she never gave an option to do that or even set up a new PIN. She insisted on giving her a PIN that does not exist yet. I will preface this by saying my wife is not dumb. Anyway, I gave up on trying to get her to not use metal, stainless utensils in non-stick pans after about the 5th argument about it because she is either too ignorant or too stubborn to not do it. So all of our non-stick pans have a bunch of scratches and gouges in the non-stick coating. Yay. That pagans don't worship Satan. Blocked him after he said, you know, if you weren't such an ugly heathen I'd you. He was 68. I was 15. What the button for audible signal only does at the crosswalk for pedestrians. My sister is an idiot. Holy shit, I just realized that those buttons aren't made to change the symbol, but to tell you if it's safe to go. Some actually do, especially on rarely used roads that use sensors for the lights to change when a car pulls up.